we're doing it. We were just talking, Cote. We've run out of conferences to promote. DevOps Day wrapped up last week. I think the other one. So for those watching the stream or in general, they need to send us the next conference everyone's going to. Although it is sort of getting into that summer season. I don't know. Are there conferences? I mean, there are some in the summer. I shouldn't say like. I feel like they'll be winding down. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see, Cote.
yeah. Well, yeah. I think I was just thinking. This year I'm not going to qualify for the top tier status on KLM after all these times because I travel less. But I think people like they go to conferences. There was like 10,000 people at KubeCon, so there's a lot going on. I got it, but I do need to scan for the conferences that exist.
Yeah, we just need to reload. I mean, I've fallen down on the job here. We haven't, or people, normally people just throw them in the Slack. That's really where I get them all the time. What about that DevOps Day Chicago? That's like always a big one.
Oh,
Isn't that coming up, or is that
probably?
We should know. We should look that up. So
yeah. What we need to do, we need to get some more media sponsorships from companies, because I think it's clear that like probably at least, let's say 2,000 of those people who went to KubeCon, it's because of the software defined talk media sponsorship.
I love it.
I
love it.
So we definitely
you should have you should have made sure to tell the PR people. It's like, yeah, we're pretty sure we're 2,000 of these signups.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
Well,
if only that was the case.
This is one of my. So I mean, maybe I should. Well, I won't say, but this will be as we call it, the streamer's delight here, or maybe for the after show or whatever. But like, Kim was listening to the Dave Grohl memoir. And she was telling me how he did all these collaborations with people.
And that is, we should tell everyone, that's the Nirvana drummer. No, he's not the drummer. He's the
no, he was the drummer.
He is the drummer of Nirvana. Also, who's the other band? Foo Fighters, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so
so she was reading that.
And she was commenting on how he just like runs into all these famous people like Madonna and Johnny Cash and then what's the guy named Lenny from that metal band Motorhead.
Okay.
And like we'll just like say like, hey, we should do something together. And so I was thinking, I should start doing that. I got to just go up to people and be like, hey, we should do something together. So I asked some advice of a few people. As people that do this kind of thing, I was like, how do you get people to do collaborations with you? And at first, I forget who I was talking with this about, but at first they were like, well, you don't want to be too direct. Like you want to just kind of like see what they're up to and maybe just suggest some stuff you can collaborate on. And then I swear, like 8 minutes later into the conversation, they were like, and also sometimes you should just say, hey, we should do something together. So I guess that's what I'm thinking of is like, I need to think about who are these people that I run into. And I think in my head, like, oh, it'd be fun to do some project. I just need to start saying like, yeah, you should have me do that with you. Like, let's do something. And so analogously here with software defined talk, it's like, you know what, if you're doing a conference, you should do something with us. We'll come and record live. We'll promote it on there. We'll go to like at KubeCon, we'll go to your media day. I know that Matt and I didn't do a great job summarizing what happened.
Did you guys go to media day? Did you actually?
Oh yeah.
Go? Did you attend?
We did. And, yeah. And there was some good stuff in there. I think, we could have done a little better, maybe covering it here in the podcast, but I think the overall sentiment was good of what was happening there. Some of the things could have been a little bit better in the media track, but whatever.
This is what I want.
Difficult.
Okay. This is what we should propose. No one may put this in after shows. Like, we'll come. This is what I would like to. This is my request. Of course, we always want to provide us some type of way to cover the cost. That would be number one. That would be great.
Yes.
Number two would be give us a room that's just reasonably close to where people are walking around, that is just quiet. It has power and it's quiet, because that way we could just go and be set up. And then I'd like to just sit there and knock out like 2 or 3 interviews like a day at least, right? And then just because that's what I would like to come. I'm willing to. The software defined talk team here, the mass, like we would like to do that, because as you know, it's like one, if you get somebody there and you want to do something quick, it's like you got to be set up and it's got to be reasonably quiet, which I know is sort of annoying. And everyone's like, no, let's just do it here. It's like when you take that sound and you put it on, it's like it's not as good. So, but like if there's a place close by, like it doesn't have to be a studio. I don't want to be like crazy. I'm just talking about like a reasonably quiet
you just need a room.
A room,
and you know
carpet, a room with carpet, and maybe some curtains would be perfect.
The scale people did that excellently, right? Like I think in a matter of just like a few days, or it was maybe a week, but they were just like, yeah, sure, and then it worked out. It was perfect.
Because because the one thing we get a lot, and it's fine. I think we like it, is somebody will be like, hey, we're gonna be at the show, like like the PR people are always like, we're going to have these really important people and these really important announcements at the show. Would you like to know about them? Would you like to cover them? And it's like, yes. I mean, yeah, generally, yes, depending on what it is. We'll put it through our filter. But then it's like, if we're there, like I need to have it all set up. I can't be like carrying around stuff, trying to throw an iPhone in your face and then, recording right on the show floor. Because that's what people think it is. And it's like, it doesn't lead to good audio. Everyone's just that was great. I mean, the way people should say it is like, that was great that you had a conversation on the show floor, and that was good that you could hear it and you liked it. But no one else needs to hear that, So that's what I want.
I mean, here's my pitch: is it's going to be the quality, the picture and the picture quality is going to be much lower than the Cube, and it's probably also going to be a little less. To be
fair, the Cube has like a full-on studio. Right?
Well, this is my whole value proposition is like, it's not going to be the crystal clear, well lit thing of the Cube, but it's going to be hella fucking cheaper.
Not as good, much cheaper.
It's only I think the audio will be just as good. It's just the video that's not going to be just as good, and definitely the content is going to be just as good, right? And then also just at KubeCon you have the new Stack come. They do great work too, right?
Yeah,
also good stuff.
A partner sponsor, we like them.
Yeah. You got to have this software defined talk little room here. We'll interview people. Sounds great, and it's not going to cost you very much because really, we just want to come to your conference and get a little bit of money for doing things. And I
was going to answer Brett's question here. It's like, yeah, I mean, the live recording noise in the background. It's like, it's like I only like it if you can control it. So like, because that's just the whole thing about it. It requires like a better recording setup. So it's like if you can get like good stage audio with just ambient background noise, which I realized that the level I just took this to was like from like, I think going up with a mic to like now we need a sound person. And we need someone running the board. And we need someone running the board who's not only cognizant of hearing it in the auditorium, but they're cognizant of what they're putting on the recording.
Well, I think
right. A lot of times, this is my problem. The sound guys, to their credit, they're good at like the sound in the room. But whenever you're like, I also need this for the podcast, they're like, yeah, whatever, we'll give it to you later. And it's like, it doesn't always work out that way.
I think the setup they had that we used from the Dell people, I think with just a few times of fiddling around for it, we could get that setup right. Like, and what that setup needed is we needed to make sure that people had the good mic technique where they were close enough to the mic that you could have the gain way down, right? And then of course, like when but I think they had the Rodecaster Pro 2 or whatever, and they had like Rode podcaster mics all hooked up, and if we just and someone like you and maybe even I could learn it, but you could be in the room and mess around with the levels.
No, listen, Dell, I think was 90% there, as most things with Barton, right? It's 90% there, but the last 10%, he's always just like, with Barton, the final 10% isn't, he's not ready, right? And it's like, no, take that entire setup and put it in a quiet room. That's what I was like. As I was watching it and I was doing some like editing on it, I was just like, I don't know. That was like producer mindset is like, take this and walk it to a room. Don't do this in the back of the thing. Right. But of course, but then I'm like, really, it's like, I mean, I get the side of it, to be fair about it. It's like, well, listen, I mean, you software, you didn't bring any equipment, you didn't have anything set up. So like they did a lot more work than us, but it's just like, the final 10%, like just walk to a room. It would have been perfect.
Yeah, well, you gotta be there on the board to adjust things for the group of people you have, and then so let's close this out. Let's do a classic enterprise software situation here. Well, we're developing a new sort of thing here, where we get set up with the room, we got good equipment, and we plan a few interviews ahead of time, but we also just take ad hoc interviews because that's what you want to do at a conference is ad hoc interviews. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
I
true,
love
but
it.
that's what happens a lot. And what we need a few partners who we're going to partner up with to work on this because we gotta we gotta pay for travel and T&E, as they say. You got to have that. But then
Yep.
two, we're going to need to figure out the equipment setup, right? So we're going to invest in some equipment, and that's all we're looking for. We don't need any big EULAs or any reserved instances for 5 years. You're not going to have to worry about that. We just need a few partners for the first year to figure this out.
No, you got it exactly, and also too, like, listen. We know the equipment. With that part, we can give just a little bit of funding. That's all we need there. But two, it's like, yeah, for all the people that say like, hey, would you come cover our thing? It would be great to us have a booth and be like, yeah, come here at this time, and we'll talk about it for 15 minutes. Kind of like the stop and chat style, right? That's what people want. You can rotate them in and out. Like that would be great. And I just tell people the better audio, it will just work so much better. It's like very hard to like convince. Like I think that's the thing that I don't like, and we'll end here. It's like the PR people and people on the show floor. They just sort of like they're just like, oh, as long as you're just talking and a microphone shows up on the show floor, they think it's going to work. And it's like, no.
I think what we got to do,
like you got to go one step further.
We've got to go to like our friendly partners. We got to just like figure out who at the CNCF to go. Like we want to go to all your conferences except the ones we don't want to go to. Just like just set us up with that. We'll just get a room and we'll do this at like all the conferences you do, whatever, except the ones we don't want to.
Done and done. All right. Well, there you go. Everybody, you have the keys now. You figured
it out. Or other people who do conferences, whatever. And we might even put 2 episodes out in 1 week. Have special
absolutely
things,
that we can do. So
yeah.
All right. Enough talk about what we want people to do at conferences. We probably should get going on this show. You good with these topics? You want to talk about? It looks like you've reviewed them. So
let me get the.
Thank you to. Is it Alvin? I don't know. For the I tried to fix the camera on my camera. I was getting, I guess, too much autofocus. Now I think it's too bright, but I don't want to change it. I can't change it anymore. So
no, I mean, software defined talk.
Andy.
Our software defined talk field in the field, that's year 2 where we figure out cameras and lighting. That's a whole
that's not a part of it. We will not be doing live video. 100%
lighting is
live video. It's like can barely make it work at home with everything perfect.
Yeah, and really, like, who wants to watch video? Come on, give me a break. This is fucking bullshit.
Except for all the people watching the stream, we really appreciate you being on today.
Yes, well, that's a whole different thing. Live streaming. That would be the other thing is we'll live stream this, right? Anything can software defined talk in the field.
We're gonna need a little bit more money now for nothing.
Well, that's the whole thing. Is like you get us the whole setup and just an Ethernet
we'll
connection.
Show up and you can log in. We'll give you our key.
Cote will bring his laptop and we'll just open it up.
That's right.
All right. I'm ready.
All right. Whenever you are, let's roll.
Well, Brandon, do you have a BlueSky account yet?
Not yet. I'm trying to get one. I've requested it, but I've not been on. How is it going over in the BlueSky world?
I have one thanks to Ashley over there at Microsoft who worked on my team for I think about 13 minutes at some point.
That's nice.
I forget it a few years ago, and I've been puttering around with it. I did get one invite, and as is tradition, the first time I get an invite to any sort of internet or social media thing, I immediately give it to our old friend Charles. Like he, I think I invited him to Twitter and other stuff. And so far, I don't think he has actually used it yet. So I bugged him this morning. I was like, hey, have you used this invite? But we'll see. But I've been using it. And, I have 2 things to say about BlueSky. I think basically all of the takes you've probably heard are true. I think that's the main takeaway. Good. It's just basically like, oh, look, this is Twitter. Like that's pretty much it.
I've heard, but it's very similar to Twitter. It is kind of a fun, positive experience because it's a smaller community. So it's kind of a throwback to the beginnings of Twitter. Everyone anticipates that will end once like everybody else, I guess, like when I show up with everybody else. And then, well, let me ask you this though. It's like, where are we on Mastodon? Because that account we do have as well. Or is
Yeah.
Mastodon just kind of like fading away? Is that just going to be like a niche,
You
like
know,
open source, real technical community? Like what's going on there?
I think I don't I can't I'm no clouded judgment guy, so I don't know how to do forward caggers or whatever. But like I think it's where it always has been. Like I don't think there's any change to Mastodon, right? Like I haven't really noticed any difference or whatever. Like I think Mastodon is fine. Like let me speak personally about it. My issue with Mastodon is that I don't get enough attention in it. So that's pretty much it. Like and and however, my tip on Mastodon is that if you use the Ivory client, I was puttering around and I found out that you can do a filter that's links only, and I find that incredibly pleasurable.
So it's like a nuzzle kind of thing. Then you can just see what's going on.
Okay. Exactly, and it's great because that's kind of like what I want. Like my maybe if I didn't have 3 kids, well, that's it. If I didn't have 3 kids and everything that comes with that, it would be more like the Twitter 2006 to 2010 era, where it's like I actually read all the stuff or I scroll through it, right? And I have both the time to read and enjoy, but also like and I don't mean this in the post 2018 or whatever Twitter way, the toxic way, but I also have like the emotional what word am I looking for? Like bounceability, the emotional just kind of buoyancy to just deal with people like talking about their lives and their sandwiches and their cats in Twitter, right? Like
you filter that out. I get it.
Yeah. Like even in BlueSky, like I almost wrote a joke and then I realized like this era of making jokes is very 2008 Twitter. Like you can't do this anymore. I was like, what? BlueSky they have these nice filters where it's basically very explicitly filter out these things that you can select, which is, that's a good idea. But I wanted to say like, they need to add a filter for cats. Like I'm fucking sick of seeing cats. I don't have time for this. Right. Like, and so like, that's kind of where I am on like Twitter and Mastodon and stuff. Is just like, I got no problem with people talking about their cats or their whatever, but it's just like, I don't have time for that. Or I don't make time for that. Right. I anyway, so
that's what TikTok is for. What's going on, man? I don't want to see cats on Twitter. I leave it to TikTok.
And so no, your analysis of BlueSky is spot on. It's basically Twitter 2008 on a like I think a month ago it was Twitter 2006 and 2007. And now, because time moves faster, it's advanced to 2009. We're going to be entering the 2011 period at some point as more and more people come in. But there was a very distinct, and again, as with all these things, this is just based on people I followed and what I was reading. Who knows what was happening elsewhere? But there was this very distinct phase before 2 weeks ago where it was basically all of the, let's call them the California minded tech people.
Yeah. So it's the California venture capitalists,
right? Which again,
mind, right? Yeah.
Which again, very Twitter South by Southwest 2007. All and whether they literally live in California or not, it's more just the California tech.
Yeah, it's the vibe, right? Yeah.
Right. And so it was all those people talking about all those things. And of course, this is the other thing I want. You can filter out in Ivory, which is nice. Like I have filters in Ivory that say, I don't want to see anything that uses the word Mastodon or Twitter.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to
want the meta conversation. You're like, I'm
right.
I want the content,
which you can't do in BlueSky, which of course that's what people talk about all the time, right? And it's just like,
well, but I think the whole thing is like the Mastodon BlueSky thing is fascinating because the media, in the sense of like those organizations like really taking to it, would be one way to really accelerate the growth of it, right? So pick any of the major news sites. And but mostly the media is writing about the demise of. It's weird because the media here is like almost like maybe not the most important, but like a very important actor. Like if the broad-based media adopted any one of these things, they would help lead the migration or the adoption of it. But there's sort of I think the media almost views itself more like, well, we're just calling balls and strikes. We're just out here making it working out. But it's like, no, if you actually went to Mastodon or to any of these and you posted a lot of interesting comments, and also too, like some of the media criticisms about like verification and things like that, because of the distributed nature of BlueSky and Mastodon, kind of go away, right? Because they can run their own server. They can say like, this is the whatever big newspaper company server. Everyone that's on the server, they're validated because they have an account. And it's like, but it's weird. I think they're stuck. It's a very unusual. I think it's almost one of these things like the media is sort of like, if you will, almost like scared to get involved as like a user, right? They're just like, hey, we just want to talk about it. It's like, no, you could change it. Like
I think it's probably similar to me. It's just like I need attention, right? Like it's if you are someone who publishes stuff, like you not only go into some social channel like this to read things or talk with people, but it's because you want to like drive traffic and attention to your stuff. Now, whether that's driving traffic to some other site, or just drawing traffic to yourself as like getting attention, right? I mean,
right.
if you're in the media, like, let me see if this works. You can't be in the media unless you have an audience. Otherwise, you're just an insane person talking to yourself, right?
So maybe we should say it this way, Dell. I think we should look at it this way and say like, the original use of Twitter was like there was a bunch of people there, and eventually media organizations, and journalists embraced it, and they found out like, wow, look how useful it is for whatever reason, audience acquisition, learning, things like that. But now I think you could flip it around and be like, hey, media, it's like a tool. It's just like the internet or newsletters or whatever. It's like saying, it's like, hey, if you invest in this platform, right, and help build it, it will actually, it will give you the opportunity to build it on your own terms, right?
Right.
Two, right? It would actually increase adoption in a way that would be meaningful to you. But like, I just don't, to your point, like, I don't think a newspaper editor, or I should say that, just a media person, I think they're just like, they get up day to day, just like everyone else. They're like, where's the audience? Where do I reach them? Versus like, let me go and invest in building that. So I don't know, like, will it ever happen? Like, cause I think all the technology is now there, right? And also too, the use cases and the things that we want to do with them are pretty well known. Like, you don't need to go reinvent everything. You can be like, hey, I can clone this in a meaningful way. So we'll see though. I don't know. I commit to this though. We'll definitely, if we get a BlueSky account, we'll throw up a software defined talk account on it. And like, I love to try them all. Like, I think we're on everything. We're on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. So I don't know if we have great channels on any of it, but like, we're at least there.
I got two more things to say. Once I get another invite, we'll set up a software defined talk thing. And then two, I think, I haven't done a technical analysis, but I think the other problem with your media thing is like, and I experienced this firsthand. Now there used to be basically two places for me to go put content, to hype, in Twitter and in LinkedIn. And now I have Twitter, LinkedIn, Mastodon, BlueSky. In response to that, I also have my newsletter, which is fine, right? And then there's also like a blog. So I've got like 7 things, right? Yep. Now, if you were like a media person, you don't have time to like run your own online presence, right? And so like, that's also an issue, is just like, until there's consolidation, like, because if you want to rebuild up your followers, you basically have to spend all your time in one channel, right? Like, there's only, as I'm doing, and you basically, you can't really hotwire up all this stuff to cross post. Like, it just doesn't really work very well. Like, maybe if I was a Python programmer, but it's just, again, it's a time suck. So like, essentially you have to just be able to like type natively and copy and paste stuff in there.
Okay, but let me throw this out though, right? I think this is a place where like there is maybe some top down coordination would need to take place. And this is what I would throw out. It's like, pick a number, 5, 10, 20 of the biggest media organizations in the world, right? Whatever they were, and say, listen, if you were running those, you would say, let's get, God, I know this is going to be painful. Let's all get on a Zoom call together and say, listen, Twitter is not working out for lots of reasons. And I don't even think they have to get into it. They just have to say like, but this idea, this functionality with a couple tweaks where it's distributed, we can all control our own verification, and we have the ability to let people kind of, if you will, come up with their own content filtering rules, right? Like, we all want that. We collectively, as these 20 media organizations, we all want that. We will all benefit from that. And we should all learn from the past of like, if we don't get involved, then our content gets devalued and we quickly kind of lose control. So what if we pick one of these things, right? And we say, listen, tomorrow, we're actually going to tell, we're going to tell all of our media journalists and, if you will, people that like, get all your stuff out there. Like, we know you don't want to do it. We know, but this is sort of for the greater good. Like this, we're going to build this up, a new public square for everyone. And if it works out well, then, the media organizations have a much bigger, if you will, say, or at least a seat at the table of how it gets adopted. So I agree. Like, it seems like impossible what I just said there. I know that seems like totally crazy, but if they did that, you could put yourself in a totally different position versus, writing an article, let's say in a year from now, there's like a new platform out and the media companies are then writing about the media, about how that platform doesn't take care of the media because it exploits people this way. And it's like, well, you know what I mean? Like, you don't cover the problem, because this problem is so central to your world, be part of doing something different. So again, I mean, that's probably very theoretical. It would never happen, but I think it's worth someone thinking about.
I mean, that happened back in the late 2000s. There was all sorts of conferences and conversation and thought leadership about exactly what you said. And it kind of like about creating all this stuff and the practices of it. So maybe people just need to rediscover that and go through it, which will happen. Speaking of rediscovering things, Brandon, recently, I think it was rediscovered that microservices are not good for everything. It was one in having a news show. You don't like to have the framing. Why are we talking about this again? Because then you're talking about it again. So I do not have that framing at all. But I think it was making me think, and we should cover what the actual thing was here, as you often do after my little rambly intros here. But like we have a pattern in the last few years of technology stuff where some interesting new, let's say, container-based technology, some cloud-based technology comes around, and everyone is interested in it, and it solves a lot of problems. And then there were some footnotes and one slide that someone remembered and then forgot seeing. And then 5 years later,
they dig it out. Yeah.
So someone is like, oh yeah, well, it was a platform for building platforms. Developers shouldn't have used it. Or like, it's not the thing that you start with. You have to be this high to ride the ride. And like, I think at this point, we need sort of like a, how media agencies have an ombudsman? We need to have like an ombudsman of tech hype, where every now and then, I guess the ombudsman doesn't do this, but the ombudsman comes in and is like, whoa, everyone, let's calm down. Remember that slide? Like, I remember that it's a platform for building platforms. Like, let's check ourselves here, right? Like, because it's no one person's fault. It just becomes this, it's not vicious, it's not virtuous, but it becomes this hype site, a flywheel. You have this flywheel of popularity where the people who are the potential users of the technology, they get very excited about it. And then, of course, Spotify always shows up. And then you always have like Spotify shows up and a few other people and Chick-fil-A and then like Amazon. And they talk about like, how these new technologies are great to use. And then you got the surveys and all this stuff, you got all this hype about stuff. And then all of a sudden, like you come to find that it was just like not the cure for everything. And then everyone gets all upset. And then the cycle repeats itself over and over again. So we got to do something to stop this, Brandon, or at least set ourselves up for it's not even a trough of disillusionment. Like, I think we've moved beyond like the hype cycle and the diffusion of innovation thing. I think it's more of like a bumpy road where it's just like crest trough that we go through. So
we're in the surf. We're like in the surf and like in the channel. We can't get out of the channel where it's just like, we're just being forget about the
we more end up in the whirlpool of tech innovation.
Yeah, maybe that's what we're in a time for. And we're just going around in circles. So I think that's a good thing. Well, listen, to put a little bit of context behind your monologue there. It's so this week there was an article from Prime Video that basically they wrote out a blog post that basically says that they switched from microservices to a monolith, and from there everything broke. I think from that headline, everything went wrong. And to like dive into this a little bit, I think first is like, I don't know, this is not meant as a test by any means, but like when I think of monolith, when I define monolith, right, where it comes from in my world, and I think this is where the entire conversation went off the rails. Was
Yes.
I think of a monolith.
Is that a pun, off the rails? Because that's
Yes.
that.
I'll just leave it there. The monolith, I think, is I think of it sort of like you take all your presentation logic, all your business logic, you just roll it into like one package that essentially runs as one process, and you put it out there, right? And the problem, as we've all talked about a million times, was like, well, what if something has to change? How does the teams work together so that people aren't breaking stuff and you can still make progress? And we all know the problem with monolith eventually gets so big that like to ship a small feature takes like a team of like 300 people and 17 years of testing, right? And so that to me, I think is like the traditional monolith.
Sure.
And for the most part, I think everybody, we could just say that's table stakes. Everybody kind of sees the problem with that. So what Prime Video has done here, I think, is to say that they embraced, let's be real precise here, they embraced serverless initially to solve their problem. Then I think what they found was like, hey, turns out a lot of this application logic is very closely related. And we've, if you will, decomposed too many different things. And we're spending too many resources trying to, if you will, coordinate all of these microservices to, this case, determine whether or not the video quality is good or bad, right?
Yep.
And they said to ourselves like, hey, it's just not scaling. Not that surprising, right? This is not a shocking thing. I mean, just be like, hey, this is like a point where it's like, well, you know, sometimes that happens. Like you can, too much management to actually do that, right? So what they did though, right, is they then repackaged many of these microservices together. And I would call this, quote unquote, just re-architecture, just simply, you know, refactoring. Now, you know, let's be real precise here. Just, I'm going to take a lot of these functions that are distributed. I'm going to put them together in one package because it's all closely related. They package that logic together, put it in a container, right? And then said, hey, we're going to run it on ECS. All makes total sense to me, right? But then they even go on in the blog post to say, it's like, well, turns out that had some scalability problems as well. So they provisioned multiple containers to do slightly different quality traffic analysis, right? So that would be like a distributed application, right? I mean, totally makes sense. It's horizontally distributed application. And they found that it ran a lot better. And so the net of this was like, hey, re-architecting some of your business logic, putting it all in one package together as a container and having the ability to distribute it horizontally seemed like the better solution to serverless, right? Which is like 100% case closed, great story, happens all the time. And I would argue has nothing to do with the monolith. Like, it's not like they're like, hey, we got rid of all tech. Like, if they had said this, like, we rebuilt everything and compiled it down to like a native operating system language like C, we provisioned the biggest EC2 server we can have, and every line of code and everything that is stored is on this one server, and we're just going to like buy bigger servers until it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work anymore, then we're just, you know, we're done. We're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, that would be a monolith, but nobody would do that, right? Not only, so the thing that surprises me, because Amazon is so precise in their writing, right? Like, we've gone over that a million times. Like, the fact that they let this blog post go out with monolith defined this way, either I misunderstood like what a monolith was, right? I need to check myself, or two, they just radically, you know, positioned the whole problem wrong from the beginning. So that's my whole take on it. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot there, Brandon, and a lot that I find compelling. I think maybe, well, first of all, I stopped programming in 2005, so what the fuck do I know? But that's never stopped me from any, you know, talking. I think there might be a generational divide in monolith, right? Like to me, a monolith is a 3-tiered application that basically is strongly coupled together, as you were just saying, right? Like, if you want to change one part of the system, you have to verify that you haven't broken all the other parts of the system at the least, right? And then the other thing about a monolith is that well, I don't know, maybe this is going too far into it, but it's almost like you use that coupling to your advantage because you're following the dry pattern kind of to a fault, where in a monolith, you're trying to do one thing in only one place, like ever, right? Yep. As a way of optimizing things. So to say that a monolith is a single process is not accurate, because you can still do things over a network, maybe, right? But I think sort of like past my programming days, like also what a monolith was still a 3-tier application, which is to say you have a layer that is the UI, often the web interface. You've got a layer that's the middleware, which is databases and coordinating stuff and did they say business logic? And then basically the bottom tier is, I mean, let's just say it's a
Persistence, right?
database.
Yeah,
It's just a
persistence. Yeah.
database. Like,
Mhm.
and maybe there's some hardware. Who cares? But
Right.
it's state.
Or some like potentially object storage way down to the bottom. Somewhere there's a
Yeah,
disk.
yeah,
Somewhere there's a
yeah.
disk you can write to. Yep.
Exactly. And so, and those 3 tiers like are one unit that ships together. And you know, you always have this fantasy that they can be decoupled, but it never happens because who the fuck cares, right?
Right.
Like it's just like so. But I think what evolved past my time of programming is that the idea of a monolith, and it's kind of in the I didn't quite understand the diagrams because I don't program anymore that they had, but like I think it's about boundaries and dependencies and coupling, right? So like when I looked at the diagrams, what I kind of saw was that instead of making network calls and transferring data, we don't do that. Right? Like we pulled in because at the beginning of the post, it's like a lot of cost was coming from orchestration and data transfer, which is what you hear from like cloud stuff, like data transfer, ingress and egress are expensive. So instead, if you just keep all that data in one place instead of moving it around, then you've increased the boundary for what you're doing. So again, like I don't really know what a monolith means nowadays because like when I look at like cloud native architectures, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Java, right? Like or like that's how OO programming works is like I've got a little process running here and I make a call over a pipe to another process to coordinate and do something. And that's just like, yeah, that's object oriented programming. And except we didn't always have good network reliability. So like, looking through this, like it is confusing what makes a monolith versus not a monolith. But I think it probably has a lot to do with like that boundary that you have and this idea that like we don't want coupling, right? Like
Right.
whenever we have dependencies on stuff, that's bad. And
And
I,
maybe there's a whole conversation there to be had around, like, to your point, like, okay, I agree with you. The 3 tiers seems like the classic. And just to say, because I think, the place that we both feel probably comfortable is like, hey, at some point, the application logic back in like the 2000s, it became this big, ball of Java yarn that was just like really complicated and too highly coupled. Of course, you could write it in a way that had plenty of Java interfaces that, was pretty decoupled and things like that. But then oftentimes you were still stuck running it together, right? Or at least it was,
yeah.
or you had to use something like EJB, and then you had different app servers, and that started to be more and more complicated. So people said, hey, it started a whole nother branch of stuff. So maybe it is like, I don't know, like it'd be good if someone like either wrote in or something like, hey, no, this is the way today's people think about a monolith. But to me, it's sort of like, this was just sort of like you're still building, if you will, just I don't know, maybe I'll just call it a
Yeah.
distributed application, right? It's not like
Yeah, totally.
it's not like you were just like piling, like, I don't know. I think there's this side of me wants to say, oh, kids today, like, you think you know what a monolith is? Let me whip out some things. Let me show you some stuff that I've seen, right? Some old client server Win32 where like, yeah, the thing is so fragile, like if you touched it. So maybe I'm looking at it wrong there. I'm open to be corrected on it. But, I'll just say like Adrian Cockcroft, who I think is, if we're electing a what does he call it? Ombudsman, right? Like maybe he's the one, like, because his post was fantastic on this. I encourage everyone to read it. It's titled "So Many Bad Takes: What is there to learn from Prime Video microservices to monolith story?" And one of the things he just wrote in his story, so we'll use this as a good point. It said they were able to reuse most of the working code by combining it into a single long-running microservice that is horizontally scaled using ECS, right? Which I think is a perfect sentence for what actually happened. So,
right,
if you call that and it even goes on to say, the problem is that they called this refactoring a microservice to monolith translation when it's clearly a microservice refactoring step. So I don't know. I would like yield to him. Like, I feel like, and maybe I'm falling into the trap of confirmation bias. Like, I kind of was thinking this way, and then he put it in perfect prose, and I was like, exactly.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Good old Adrian.
If we think it's right, he says he does it well there.
I think the other side of this, right? So we've walked up to the monolith and regarded it, but it's also like, you know, despite kind of being in this area for 8 years on the marketing thing, like I've never really gotten comfortable with what exactly a microservice is, and what I mean by that is at least two things. We'll see if it turns into five, but like one, the way that people talk about microservices is they define them based on the benefits that you get, not the technology that they are, right? So
Right.
the way any microservice conversation used to begin, you know, way back in 2014, 2015, was that like was the decoupling thing. Like you need to move fast, and when one team wants to change how their part of the system works, they block on everyone else because you're coupled. So therefore, you have microservices, which means they can change things around and they can ship without the other people having to worry about it. And then, you know, all the old people are like, well, what happens when you change the API and the dependencies break? And then it's just like off to the races. So like versus like, and then when I would go look at implementations, I think implementations of microservices, I would be like, so that's an API over the network? Like I still don't quite get how that's not just like what read write web used to write about, like, you know, or whatever. Like, I don't know, it's the different characters and it's a URL you go to and you pass some parameters and it returns something. It's an API. Like, but I never quite and I still don't quite understand what makes a microservice not just an API passing back and forth JSON or whatever over HTTP. Like, I don't know why that's a big deal, that it's this whole other thing. Now, and again, because the way people describe it is about the benefits and the operational stuff that microservices give you. And then to compound it, then there's also serverless, which is kind of like, well, how is this all different from that as well? Like, it's still like, see, it basically seems like here's like a URL that you go to and you pass it a bunch of shit and it passes a bunch of shit back at you. And that's the whole deal, essentially, whatever you want to call it. And I guess maybe you could have some rules about if there's a process that is long running that holds on to state versus a stateless process that comes and goes and just passes the buck on to some data store somewhere to actually hold the state. And then the client has to have a unique GUID or whatever that when it goes back to this stateless process, it gives it that GUID. The process looks up the data and pulls that data from the database and then does whatever it was doing, which is really just a bunch of fucking bullshit to call it stateless, right? Like, and maybe that's part of the thing is like what I just described there is you have to do this orchestration and passing state back and forth, which can get expensive because it's like a bunch of extra processing versus like, well, why don't we just make it not a forgetful ephemeral process and have it just sit here holding on to state?
Well, maybe one way to do it is to step back from the technology a little bit. And Andy from the chat here says, you know, serverless functions can be considered microservices. The differentiator is who manages the resources. And maybe if we take
the cloud.
But if we take this microservice and we just say, let's put aside the technology for a second, just say, you know, in the case of this Prime Video, we could say it's a microservice because on its own, at least in this context, it doesn't really provide any, you know, quote unquote business value. So it's a microservice to Prime Video, and Prime Video is the service to the end user. And what does it do? It lets you watch videos and live stream sporting events. And so within Prime Video, though, within that service, that large application, there would be many microservices. In this case, we're talking about one that monitors the quality. Now, you could say, just to be very pedantic about it, but be like, well, and there's an application that, you know, Adrian talks about, like you could sell that separately and be like, hey, we are just a company that provides a video monitoring service to people that want it. And that's the end. And so in that case, it becomes, if quote unquote, the microservice is the service. You know what I mean? It's like someone's managing it, someone's paying, you have customers, people are paying for it. It's kind of managed. So maybe the distinction is more in this case, it's just sort of like, how do you package things up to deliver business value? And behind the scenes, it doesn't matter if it's serverless or if it's a container or whatever. It's a smaller piece of a larger thing that delivers value.
And you're reminding me of another, like the traditional microservice example where, and I think it's even used somewhere in the current dust up, where there's a screenshot of an Amazon book page, and
Mhm.
you do this with Spotify
Yeah.
too, where you
Yeah.
highlight all the little portlets, as we used to call them,
Yep.
and you say that's a microservice. So I guess you could define a microservice as an architectural style where instead of having one method or API call that says, give me the page.
Mhm.
Instead, there's a whole other thing that says, give me this component, give me this component, and I will stitch together the page, whoever I
Right.
is. So it's basically like you've got like a stupid monolith that actually does all the work to like pull stuff together. And instead you have these well-defined components or APIs or microservices. And so you favor breaking up each of these things. But again, it's sort of like when microservices were first coming about, I was like, yeah, but that's just like APIs. Like we've always been trying to have this like clean separation of data, like make sure that like you subcomponent things out and blah blah blah. And so like, so what is it about, what's the technology that makes a microservice thing different? And I guess to the point, you could say like, I mean, I can see that serverless is basically like, my answer for all this stuff is like, everyone actually just wants public cloud, and we're just dicking around until we have that, right?
That's true.
Like, of course, you don't want to manage
But
infrastructure.
maybe just to answer your question, I think you're hitting on it close. But I think back to the management, it's like an API, like being again very specific here, would be like, hey, you could always just have an API, but the idea was like you're going to run the package yourself. The service part is like, no, I'm actually providing you an
Yeah.
API. It's
Yeah.
available on a network. You can use it, and I will manage the availability for it. So I am providing you the service. You don't need to download, install, and run this thing and use the API. You just use the API from the service I'm providing to you.
Yeah.
So it does
Now,
get
now,
complicated. Mhm.
now, the other issue, like, I mean, you're a esteemed product manager. Like, there's also a big product management assumption in microservices, so if we go all the way back to our good old friend, Patrol Express, or the BMC Performance Manager, which,
Oh, God
you
help
know,
us.
like if you've seen any demos of monitoring and log management
You
and
know what it
looking at
is.
the
It does
topology
that.
of a
That's what it
network,
does.
it does that. It's exactly what it did. It gathers the data, sticks it in a database, and presents it, and lets you take minimal action and reporting on it. But like as the product manager of that product, if we were doing the pure Amazon web page microservices thing, like you would have to go potentially to whatever team was in charge of like the date selection widget. No, that's too absurd. You would have to go to like the team that would render what a server or a node look like, and like negotiate with them along with 15 other teams that like by this date your widget should do this, right? So when you're selling a product, like there's inherent coupling between all the stuff because you've got a roadmap. It's just like, well, we're going to ship version 3.5 of this product, which is going to have all of these features. And so there's this date that we need to hit. And so now we're coupled. Now, maybe what I'm missing here is that that's only the case for private cloud software, and then whereas if you have a SaaS, you can be a little more loose. So like maybe at Salesforce and ServiceNow with Brandon, the product manager, you can go to the team that like renders what I don't know, what a network endpoint looks like, and they can be like, yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah, well, I think we can
And then
even
it's
use.
cool.
Let's return to our example here. I think Prime Video. I think at the top, right, there's obviously a team of product management people. I'm sure working on it. But like, I think at the end, right, the business requirement is like, hey, we want to make sure our videos stream in a certain quality, and we don't see a lot of buffering, because people would say like the number one problem that we're hearing about hypothetically is that like it's buffering, it's slow, the videos are low quality, right? And they know at the business level, if that happens too much, end of game. It doesn't matter how much you spend on content. If I can't actually watch it in my home theater setup, I'm moving on. I'm going to a different app. So I'm sure that's kind of where this started. And then, there are probably a bunch of discussions internally about like, how do we do it? And in this case, right, they decided to monitor all the end users, right? And so as on the product side of it, maybe you would give a little bit and say, listen, okay, it's going to maybe take too much time and effort to do everything. Let's do a sample, right? And Adrian Cockcroft gets into this in his post. And it's like, well, or let's start that way. Let's start because we're going to stream kind of, if you will, content that isn't have like some huge event. It's not like the Oscars, right? It's like, so let's work out the details. But when we go live, in this case of like NFL Sunday Ticket at YouTube, I hope NFL Sunday Ticket at YouTube, I hope they're working as hard as they've ever worked about like, we are going to have to stream, something like, 10 to 15 football games simultaneously from a user base that will be extremely vocal, right? Like, you better have that figured out. So they've got, so you can kind of see the give and take in the business discussion versus like, we'll just use our children as a thing versus like, it's fine. If the latest Mr. Beast video, if it hiccups a little bit, the kids, they'll be all right. They'll complain to their parents, but the parents will probably be like, turn off YouTube, go do your homework, right? You know what I mean? So there's some give and take between the users there. And of course, I fully admit YouTube that Mr. Beast is probably bigger than everything I just mentioned there. So, but you get the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's I think this is a great opportunity to relearn and discover what exactly a microservice is.
Yeah, but I did before you get off the topic completely, Coach. I want to we'll back up to kind of your world. I think now, where are the legitimate gripes? Because this is such a passionate topic online, at least in the world we're in.
Yeah.
Where is the emotion coming from? And I think this is directly in the world yours. I think what people are saying is more like this. It's like, we had to refactor all this code. Like if I was on the Amazon team, I think what they would want to say in a more blunt way is like, man, we did all this in serverless. It pretty much did what we wanted. Then we had to spend 3 months refactoring everything. And then when we actually wanted to run it, we had to go get the team trained up on ECS. And it turned out we thought it was going to take us like a few days. But even just learning all the ECS and how to make it all work, this is your developer toil thing. It's like, that took a whole bunch of time, and we had to hire some new people or get to a bunch of training. And we're really frustrated that we had to do all that. We feel like this is too complicated because we wanted to write, because if I'm on the business logic side, is like, we're really good at writing these detectors at figuring out if video is bad. And that's what the people we hired to do. But now they're all writing YAML, and they're stuck in Docker, and they're stuck in ECS configuration, and they're all mad. This is not what they want to do. And I think like that frustration, I get. Like that's the part, like if they had written that, I'm like, I get it. It is like, we've all been there, and it's just like, it's too hard. It's even now, it's still too hard. So I don't know if that's just setting up your developer toil pitch. But I did want to acknowledge I think the frustration came out sideways here, right? I think that like the problem is actually, something slightly different than what was written. What is your take?
I think that's like, I think the passion around monoliths over the years is kind of, it's like what you're saying is like, if you're telling someone who's doing a monolith that they, whatever that means, that they shouldn't be doing it, then like they just have to like learn a bunch of new shit. And they're probably like, yeah, but this works. And then they're probably also like, I know it's not working, but that's because of all these things I've been telling you for years, right? Like, do you remember that time when I was like, hey, we need to have pretty clear API boundaries and separations. Hey, you might want to make sure that like this feature you have on this one screen doesn't trickle down to the database. And instead you want to like protect against that. Like that's, page 392 of that Martin Fowler book, right? Like just like all these things. And it's just sort of like, well, yeah, now we're stuck here because we made all these compromises, and like, it's not, to be a kid, it's not my fault. Right.
Yeah.
And like, totally. I think that's the other inherent thing is just like, I mean, to use the old JP stuff, like just all software turns into crap after a while. Right. And so like, you've got like a good 3-5 year period where it's kind of like agile enough or whatever. Agile is the wrong word in this context, but like, yeah, it takes a lot of work, not only to make sure that your software is in good shape, but as you were saying, also like the other issue is that like, then all of a sudden you have to put this new infrastructure in place that it's not that the tools or the infrastructure you're using are completely unproven. It's just, it's not proven for you. Right. And so like, whether or not it's putting in place, like we got to switch over to serverless, or we need to switch to microservices, or we need to switch to using public cloud from using private cloud, or we need to switch to Kubernetes. It's like, all right, well, now we got to deal with this shit. Like we got to learn how to do it and port everything over. Like even for as great as like backstage based stuff is, probably over the next couple of years, there'll be a lot of people who are like, oh, now we've got to migrate like our whole Confluence setup over to backstage. And like, we tried to write some scripts and then the links broke and then I didn't have security access to this. And now we got Git involved over here. And it's just like, oh, and then when we're finally done, like now it's in black background with neon.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no, totally.
And like the answer isn't necessarily that like we shouldn't have done that. The answer is sort of like, well, why didn't Atlassian just do that? Right? Like if or why didn't the community, the open source community that we're relying on, just sort of like why is BlueSky making its own federated protocol instead of using the Mastodon one? Like, I don't really. I'm sure there's some critical differences that I could see, but like, come on, I've programmed before. It's just fucking computers, right?
Well,
like,
I think maybe this is a good place to end this topic. Is to go out on one final Adrian Cockcroft quote here. It says that I can never say the name right. So, but here's what he says, right, the very end of his article that everyone should go read. It says, quote, I suggest you take a look at datazoom.io, which provides this as a service and where the chief architect and CTO are both Netflix colleagues of mine. So maybe the answer to the question of whether to build a microservice or a monolith is neither. You should be calling an existing service rather than rolling your own. And I thought that kicker at the end is like, to what you were going, is kind of the answer to all these questions. It's like, yeah, like before you built anything, back to the product management question, could we just go use what they have out there right now and not do any of this, right? And that's sort of like, you know what I mean? That's like, like even Amazon, like everyone forgets that over and over, just like you're saying before. It's like, you wrote software, you know it can be done, you know somebody else did it. Why not just use what's there? Which I thought was a great end to that post.
Yeah, and you know it's gonna rot and bite you in the ass later. So just have it be someone else's ass that it bites. Like, you know, I don't know. Well, you know, just as we don't have much time left, but it was exciting to see that IBM relaunched it's a Watson thing by adding an X to the end, which is fine. I've been waiting for them to kind of be like, hey, remember us? So I don't know.
What do you think,
that'll
though?
work out.
I mean, it's hard not. I think, you know, as a brief aside here, it's like you kind of knew this was coming, right? And my comment was here. It's like IBM always announcing something new before showing anything new, and it's like,
right. Well, that is
of the this is the stuff when people talk about, when they say like quote unquote marketing is bad, right? Yeah. These are the moments where I'm like, where it kind of does make the argument, right? It's like, you're announcing that in June or July, you know, you're going to have something that nobody's really seen. So it just reeks of like a group of people got in a room. There was some talk of like, what do we have, right? And I'm sure people were like, it doesn't really do this. It doesn't do this. Well, and then there was like, we've got to make some announcement today. We have to do something today. And it's like, and when it finally comes out, it would be shocking if it's not, if you will, kind of disappointing, right? Like, you know, like as we've been recording today, Google I/O is going on. I'm sure they're announcing a bunch of stuff that they will probably make available very quickly that will actually get hands on. And it's just like, and the X at the end of Watson, again, it's like, it kind of does like if it was a parody, right? You know what I mean? Like, you would come up with these ideas. Let's launch it. Let's make Watson lowercase. Let's add an X. Let's say it's coming in June. Let's also say that we're using it internally to reduce headcount by 30%. It's like, what are you like? You just today you are like, you haven't been doing this all along, but like, because these announcements came out, now you're going to get rid of 30% people. Like, none of this reeks of like authenticity in any way. So now, final thought on it though is just like, happy to be proven wrong. I hope they announce something that totally blows us away. But man, this is the epitome of overpromise, under-deliver written all over it.
Now, maybe it sounds like maybe you have done the research, but I didn't actually go see if I could install something somewhere, or if there are even like reference papers. But I think the principle you're going over here is like, I would basically, having worked in marketing for so many years, my advice would be, don't announce anything until you have something that it can even be it doesn't have to be a GA thing, but you need to at least have like a website you go to, or like a GitHub repo Is that the right phrase? Like just like
Yeah,
a thing. And
something,
so
right?
for
Or
example,
a chatbot you can use that people are excited about.
right,
It does a bunch of stuff that people come back to you. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I just discovered it does this." Right? That's what you want, right?
or even like and again, I haven't done this research, so who knows? But let's like, even if they were like, hey, here's like a 50-page PDF of really awesome Chat GPT prompts that you could use if you had the right data set with it, right? Like even something like that would be good, because I think there are plenty of people who have talked about and are imagining like enterprise corporate uses for Chat GPT, right? But
Yeah.
there's not really any demonstration of interesting stuff, which is what this Watson stuff was supposed to be all along. So it's just sort of like, even if you just had ideas of how you would use this stuff and you were like, yeah, all you need is like, 5 terabytes of training data that you sick this thing on. And then even though we may not do that, we can come and integrate it for you and like figure out how to make it all work. Like you could even demonstrate. All we did is we made a dummy instance of SAP stuff, and we made a Chat GPT plugin that allows you to query it. Like that would be amazing. That would be like a good Watson X sort of thing. But you got to have like something. And so I think it's always good, unless you're shipping it or unless you're making it available, you don't really need to talk about it. I don't think you're going to win any points. Like there's no like
No,
not
you're just gonna. In fact, I think people are just gonna come out and just say like, "Oh, this is just like the same old IBM." Because a little behind the scenes is like, one of the things when I was at IBM, like people would ask all the time, like, "Hey, can I use that Jeopardy thing? Where's that Jeopardy thing that IBM wanted?" And it's like it had been dismantled. It wasn't around. It's like you could have just kept that up and running and be like, "Hey, just ask random questions to the Jeopardy engine, right?" And just gotten answers. People would have loved it. But again, it's like that would have been something that's actually going on. And just the way this was all rolled out, I mean, it has like, you saw the press release come out and then you saw the IBM PR machine. That's one thing they're good at, right? Like all these various outlets wrote about it. And it's just like, all right, we'll see in a few months, it just, and another thing I can't get out of my head is just like, because they announced this whole Watson Health thing and the idea they were going to use this, machine learning for x-rays. And it's like, it didn't work. They got rid of it. It's like, I don't know, why would you come back and just do this again and again and again? Just wait until you have the cure, right? Wait till you have a thing that every doctor in the world's like, yep, I'm running every diagnostic I have through this machine, right? It's like, wait till you have it. Like, otherwise you just end up with like a lot of nice marketing collateral that gets retired in a few years. So.
Now, just briefly, and then we'll get to the last segments of our show. Now, you must have been tracking this, but the whatever a passkey is came out from Google, and like I signed up to use it. It's great. It's just like it makes it like using a normal Apple device where you just scan your face or your finger to do something, which is wonderful. Now, how did they front run that like a year ago that they were coming out with it?
PassKeys, this has been in the works for years. So this is all coming out of a standard, right? And so this is like we probably mentioned on the show a while back that all the major operating system vendors, like Windows, Mac, and all the major browsers, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, whatever, they're all going to support this. This is what has been the problem before. Was like, hey, there wasn't some universal standard of like, how do I communicate between these operating systems and applications?
You need the FIDO or some nonsense.
Exactly, FIDO. That's the standards body behind the scenes. So yeah, so they all agreed that they were going to do it, which is like step one. But of course, many agreements have happened, and then for many reasons it's never come to fruition. But like it looks like Google sort of has actually implemented it and it said, okay, now start using passkeys, as we all got the email. So the idea is that like, okay, because the support is in all the operating systems and it's in all the browsers, that this, I almost call it's like the beginning of the end, right? Like this could actually, because since we've been in technology and even before us, people have been trying to get rid of the password and it has never happened, right? If anything, there's just more passwords now than ever. But I was like, wow, this is actually seems like it could really happen. Like Google's on it, and then obviously Apple's supporting it. And so will we see more sites basically start to use it? And then of course, people like 1Password find a way for us that move between computers and between different operating systems to make it all work together, which they've announced support for as well. So it's like, I don't know, there's like a reason for optimism here. It's like, I think it could actually happen.
I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to bring that up to compare it to like our Watson talk there, right? Because like it seems like, well, not seems like the passkey stuff, like for me, because I don't pay attention to this, like one day I'm reading news and it's like, oh, Google has this thing.
Right. It's here now, right?
Like
Yeah.
and I can go use it. It's right here.
Yeah.
However, there was a whole like standards. I'll just say open. There was a whole like open standards community process that had been going on for years
Yep.
to make it possible, right? So you've got two different things. You don't just have like all of a sudden Google's like, we're going to make it so you can log into Gmail with your like Face ID or whatever, like, and that's coming this summer, right? Like instead, it's a different sort of process where it's like, well, the industry has been working on this, so it's taking a while, but we're establishing that it works. And now all that's left to do is for all the different people to implement the stuff that makes it work.
Right. Everyone is agreed. Yep, exactly. Everyone is agreed to the standard and the technology, and so now everyone is gonna start rolling it out.
Which I think is a different like thing than like a vendor saying or a cloud service saying that like we're gonna have this AI thing in the future. Like we have this thing, it's just not available yet. And so like it makes me think like if you're going to announce that you're going to have something, that probably is only good if it's coming off of like this kind of like community standard process, right? Because everyone, it's possible to verify that the technology actually works. And what you can pre-announce is that you'll be doing it and kind of like adding your own stuff to it.
Yeah, and remember too, like we're looking at only at the very end of this where I think there is reason for optimism. Of course, we'll have to see what happens. But remember, this is on top of like years, decades of like everyone having their own solution. And I was like, oh, Google's announced a new way to do it. You have to use Google Authenticator. And then there's like another tool like Okta. And there's another, there's been like a million of these different solutions. Microsoft has a whole suite of them. And they've all been very independent. And they've had various degrees of working with the passwords or not. Apple's whole Apple ID, its own, ecosystem. So, this is only, let's not pretend like, oh, everyone got together and did the right thing at the beginning. It's like, this is only at the end of like, everyone's like, hey, normal people have 200 passwords here. If you happen to work in technology, you probably have 1,000. You don't even know about them all, right? And it's like, so now people are like, we got to fix this. And that's where the adoption of this is together. And I think that's the reason to be optimistic. Of course, what looms ahead is and I think they've done a very good job. So I'm endorsing it as well. But like, you don't know the end user, the consumer, will they take to it, or will they just be like, I don't understand this PassKeys. It's where did my password go? I want my password back, right? So we'll see.
And then as another contrast, like to that contrast, like that home automation thing called Matter or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I remember in the fall, like Apple announced they had Matter support, and it was like, oh, finally all this stuff will work together. Because it's a standard that they've been working on for years and consorting with people, and all these other people have announced they have Matter support. And so far, I think that's meant absolutely fuck all.
Yeah, no, I think in fact that's even worse. It's kind of gone sideways. I think a bunch of people tried to, and then it wasn't really working. Now people are kind of backing away from it. So that's kind of the downside of like, it turns out being interoperable, either it doesn't work or it doesn't align with what the businesses ultimately want, right? And they're just like, no, what made us special was that we did this thing other, right? So that seems like that one's going, I don't know, the bad way.
Which seems bonkers, because like, I mean, I'm no Ben Thompson, but it feels like owning that networking layer as a proprietary thing doesn't make business sense for anyone. I don't know. I guess it makes business sense because you have to choose one of the three home automation ecosystems and lock into it. So it's very user friendly.
I don't know. I just, on a quick aside there, like I just think never underestimate the executive incompetence that can come out of large strategic worlds. And I just wanted to quickly cite an example. So we talked about GM, getting rid of CarPlay. Don't need to say anything else, but I just thought like Ford came out and the CEO was like a genius. He just said the obvious, and he's going to get a lot of publicity. He just says like, yeah, they're going to keep CarPlay and Android Auto and all the Fords. And he says, he just says, it's like, we lost that battle 10 years ago. And he's like, yeah, he's just doing the obvious thing, saying the obvious answer, and also like, putting his competitor in a bad position. Here GM is like, no. In fact, I saw today, they've hired a former Apple executive with experience in building such and such. And it's like, it's not going to work at all. It's going to be awful. And it's like, but I'm sure they have just teams of people advising them on how smart this is and, how good it is. And it just shows you, like, to me, it's just clearly just incompetence at high levels is everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's true, Brandon. Well, speaking of competence at many levels, there's several conferences coming up, and I will be at one of them tomorrow. Well, I guess it's today, but I actually am here in London today for the DevOps UK conference. So that's going to be on May 10th, as we record now, May 11th and May 12th, and I'm going to be at several other conferences. There's a let's see. There's Platform Con Online, which I'll be speaking at. That's June 8th and 9th. That'll be fun in the June timeframe to check in on platform engineering. I think we should set up a reminder, Brandon. I think I'm gonna say maybe not August, because that's Europe. In September, we need to have an episode in September where we check in on platform engineering.
All right,
and
like
see,
it.
like, we got to be like, is platform engineering a thing, or was Schaefer right the whole time? And like, maybe we'll have him on to do we'll get someone from Humanitech, and we'll get Schaefer on, and we'll have a panel and see what's up with platform engineering.
Like
And
it.
then there's also DevOps Days Amsterdam, which is June 22nd and 23rd. I'm not speaking there, but I'm just going to attend. There's a lot of people that we know who are going there. And then finally, there's VMware Explorer US, and Spring One is going to be in Las Vegas, September 6th and 7th. And then they finally announced this, so I can announce it. I'm going to be giving the keynote at DevOps Days Des Moines. How do you say that? Des Moines?
Iowa?
Boy,
Where are we? Which
in Iowa.
in Iowa? Des Moines, Iowa. Oh, okay.
Des Moines.
I
Yeah,
thought you
Des
were trying
Moines.
to turn me up with a European one.
No,
I
no,
can take care of you. The Midwest. Love it.
That's going to be that's September 6th and 7th, and Spring
Okay.
One and VMware are August 21st and 24th.
It feels like we should all be there. I don't know how we're all going to get to Iowa, but man, that feels like I expect there to be a big contingent of software defined talk.
I think hopefully I'll get a discount code, but yeah, just come to DevOps Days Des Moines in Iowa.
I want a picture of you with a big ear of corn, like dipped in 17 gallons of butter. If that doesn't come back from that trip, you've not achieved your objective.
Yeah, back at our old rent house here in Amsterdam. Well, not here. I'm in London. Over in Amsterdam, there was an Irish husband and an American wife who lived down the street, and I was talking with them one day, and the wife was from Iowa, and I was like, "Wow, Iowa, huh?" And she was hilarious. She was like, "That's the same reaction every American always gives me."
No, it kind of is. I mean, it's kind of true.
Yeah, I think
maybe I would have said the same thing. Yeah,
I think only maybe if you were from like North Dakota or Idaho, you might get that reaction. But I think Iowa would be the number. No, even Rhode Island, people would just be like, "Huh, Rhode Island." But Iowa, people are like, "Wow, I've never met someone from Iowa." So
no, totally. No, you're right. I think Iowa, Idaho, they're in a very similar kind of surprise, if you will, when you meet someone from there.
Yeah. Well, do we have any bureaucracy to go over, Brandon?
A couple things here. One, I want to say thanks to I think it's Matthias for giving. He gave Software Defined Talk a free subscription to the Oh Dear service that helps monitor your site's SSL certificates. So, turns out our provider, they had, if you will, been. I shouldn't say they did anything because it was fixed almost before it was. But he said, "Hey, turns out your certificate has expired," and then he said, "Do you want a free?" Subscription to the service? Like, yes, we do. We always want free stuff. So we're happy to take, if you've got like some kind of service for website monitoring or podcasting or something we can use, we always enjoy that. So now, Cote, I'll be notified. I guess you will be too. But let's be fair. You're not going to read that notification. I will be notified if the certificate goes invalid. And also mailed some stickers to Jacob in Quincy, Massachusetts. And if you like a sticker, all you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com. I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Well, I neglected one other conference. If you're in Brussels or the Lowland countries on June 1st, I'm going to be giving a keynote at the VMware User Group, Belgium there, which is free to attend. So you should come. It's very easy to get to Brussels.
So you have everyone covered from Brussels to Iowa, it looks like. I guess we're going to have to get to California. No, Vegas. You have Vegas too in there.
Yeah, I need some Oceania stuff. If I was going to
that's what we have Matt Ray for now. We keep Matt Ray down there.
Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, good. He'll cover Oceania for us. Oceania, whatever. Well, what do you have to recommend this week, Brandon?
This week I started watching Silo. It's a new Apple TV Plus show. It's based on the book Wool, which I've recommended probably several times on the show, by Hugh Howie, I think. And so if you like the book, obviously you'll probably like the series. So 2 episodes in, I think it's well done. I think it seems to be pretty true to the book. It's always interesting when you read a book you really like, because the first episode is sort of like, if you will, it's like you kind of have these, at least I have like mental images I've created of characters, and then you see it portrayed. So it's always like, wait a minute, they didn't make exactly what I thought. But now that I'm into it a little bit, I'm interested to see how it goes. It seems like it's well produced, like a lot of things in Apple TV. So hopefully it'll be good. 2 episodes in, I'd recommend it. So we'll see how they finish out the season.
Well, that explains it, because there's a kid's book that is, it's I forgot about Wool. It's kind of like Wool, and the premise of the kids book is that there's like all these people living underground, and the kids like I forget the name of it, and the kids like graduate and get to some class, and they get categorized, which Wool is a little bit like, if I don't remember Wool that well, but like I kept seeing these previews for that show and thinking like, is this about that kids book? Like it seems a little serious, but now
the
you're
young
right.
adult doesn't quite have the young adult, because the young adult thing is always like Hunger Games or Divergence, where it's like the kid graduates and then they get like selected for something. So this doesn't really have that. It's more like dystopian view.
Yeah. No, totally. I remember. I didn't connect that together.
I've just watched Hunger Games with my son. He was into that, and I tried to get him on like what's the other one? Maze Runner. I was like, I think you'll like this one too, but he was like, it's not good. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like I think it's the same. I mean, I'm not in a bad way. It's like it's a good. I thought it was a good young adult, especially for a boy. I was like, I think he'll totally end it. And he's like, this is another thing, Cote. Like, I don't know what you do, but like, I just at this point, try to make no recommendations to my son, no matter what. Like, literally, if he's even like bleeding, gushing blood, it's almost like, I don't know if I should say anything. I feel like if I say something, it would be rejected. If you said something like, you're bleeding, you're like, your life is being threatened, I think you should take care of that. I'd be like, it's fine, Dad. It's fine. So it's like, I'm always just, I don't know what to do. I guess I'm just living the parental nightmare that we all are. So anyway.
No, that's true. That's true. You're reminding me though that
I will not recommend any more movies. I try never to recommend movies to him, but we'll see.
Oh, no, you don't want to do that. Cormac he finished reading the first long book that he chose to read recently, the second Percy Jackson book, which is very exciting that he read through that. I bought it of all things, I bought it on Apple Books, and he just has been reading it on his phone.
Yeah, she did. Well, I recommended Lord of the Flies immediately. Oof. That was wrong, because it had like an English teacher vibe. So I was like, I want to walk that back. I'm like, oh no, that book, who would read that? That's, of course, you didn't enjoy that. But anyway,
no. Well, speaking of books, my recommendation is I tried to start reading this book a little while ago, but then I got back into it, and it's this older book from the 2000s called How to Idle. And it's all about it's a manifesto, as it says, for it's a loafer's manifesto. And I remember I stopped reading this because it was just a little too late 2000s bloggy of what they were doing, just kind of putting out ideas for this guy Tom who wrote it. But I think I'm starting to detect an interesting life philosophy in there beyond just like the obvious, and that is like, we all struggle with this, Brandon and listeners, is being comfortable with doing less. I mean, here we are doing an extracurricular podcast, all the effort that we put into it and all this stuff. And sometimes you just got to be like, I should just do less stuff and be satisfied with it. And I think that's what I'm looking to extract from this book, is maybe not as strident as this guy is about loafing, but just like being comfortable with doing less, I think is what I'm going to extract from that. So How to Be Idle. Maybe I'll give an update when and if I finish it. Speaking of finishing things, you've just about finished another episode of Software Defined Talk. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you've listened this far and you don't subscribe, you should definitely look up Software Defined Talk in a podcast thing somewhere. That's what they're called nowadays, right? Podcast things. And subscribe to it. We have videos posted in YouTube and other places like that. You can see the live streaming. And also, if you want to see links to a lot of the things that we talked about, and many things we didn't, you can get the show notes if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/414, where you can also learn how to join our Slack channel, where there's all sorts of interesting conversations throughout the week occurring and happening. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, good episode, Cote. Thanks a lot to Andy for he was very active here. Thanks for the advice on the camera. They said it was too much autofocus, so I switched it to a different setting. Although now I feel like it's too bright. But anyway, I'm gonna try to work on that. Always good to get some feedback on the video setup. So
every time I read about doing lighting for camera stuff, well, one, I get confused, and then two, I kind of understand stuff, and then three, at the end, they're always like, and then you'll probably just need to adjust it to look good.
yeah,
and I'm like, no. I don't know what that means. I don't know about lumens. It's yellow
white
over
balance,
here. It's blue here.
Well, that's what I did. That's the mistake I made. I just put it on autofocus, right? Because like, but then it's like, you're right. When you're watching, you want autofocus for a photo, right? But like, you don't want to like necessarily autofocus for like.
I still think the iPhone is kind of the best bet for a camera. Like whatever they're doing over there in Apple.
True. Yeah.
It's just like I shot a video recently on my iPhone instead of like my fancy Sony pseudo DSLR, whatever it is, and it's just like, the iPhone's better because it just figures it out for you. And
it does feel like there's like a market. I mean, I know there's a bunch, but like it's surprising to me that there isn't, because like most people, when you try to get into it, like I have this like it's kind of a low end DSLR. It has like a lens on it and stuff, right? And people say like, well, when you try to get like good enough, you got to get to that level. But really, you just want like just a better Logitech. You know what I mean? You want to pay more for like a Logitech webcam.
Totally.
Like,
no, and that's the thing.
Works like a webcam that has like a lens on it, but like there doesn't seem to be any middle. It's just like
and then
go ahead.
Even I mean, I haven't bought like a Canon or whatever, but like even like this Sony digital camera I have that's like it's for vloggers or whatever. Like it's built around that thing, and like it just needs a button that's like be as good as an iPhone. And instead it has all these other buttons. Like it has like, the M and the A, and then it's got like you can select the scenery, and then it has something that's called like an auto mode, but it like isn't. Like it doesn't work well. And but versus like I open up the iPhone and it's fine.
It just
always.
Works.
And so like I don't get what the deal is. Like it just needs a button that's just like be like an iPhone.
Well, even Apple though, everyone complained about it. They put a camera in their new monitor, their fancy, expensive monitor, and everyone says it's not good. So So anyway.
Now that said, I mean, the iPhones we're talking about are like, $1,000, $1,500. So maybe that's the problem.
Maybe. And it wouldn't be surprised me if someone said like, well, here's the link to the Blackmagic camera you want is $3,000. And it's like, oh, no wonder I'm patching together this
like,
Sony.
I see. Auto mode.
All right. Well, thanks to Andy. Thanks for everyone else listening in. We know it's a little early. We know we were competing with Google, but sometimes it is what it is. You have to make the right time. So
that just means that Richard Soroder wasn't watching us. That's
right. All right. To all the streamers, we hope to see you next time. Hopefully next week. If not next week, then very soon after that.
Bye.